It sounds like when you sit down to write, you sit down to write a song from beginning to end.
A little, a little, yeah. Well, it's funny. I never really ever started demoing stuff until like maybe the pandemic. I guess. Well, no, I guess I demoed stuff before, but I never thought about like just like all the details of a song until we were in the jam room. But maybe because I had so much more time before we started practicing, I was able to get in the details. But yeah, sometimes I never sit down and write or sit down and be like, I'm going to write a song. It usually just comes organically out of just sitting there playing guitar. But sometimes you'll start a song and you're just not going to be able to finish it. You'll come back to it later. I think even like one song on the album Planetary Clairvoyance, the opening track is called Beg for Life. And I remember the way the song ends, it kind of ends with just this like melody being tapped on the guitar. But before that, that sort of rhythm progression, I didn't think that was the end of the song. And I had written something to follow it after. But every time I kind of went back to it, I was like, oh, this feels tacked on. And this riff I'm tacking on, that could be the beginning of another song. And it ended up being the beginning of this song on Planetary called Infinite Resurrection. And knowing it was like, this is almost like too good of a riff to just close on. Like this, you could build a song out of this because it's such an intense riff. So sometimes these things happen accidentally. Like maybe you just sort of strike gold but then you're inspired to keep writing the song. But sometimes I guess it depends. They're all different. You'd have to like throw a song title at me and I could tell you if I wrote it in order or not.
Okay. Yeah, maybe. When we speak about the latest album, there's definitely some songs.
Yeah, that one is much fresher in my mind writing. So that one would be, you can softball me with that one.
But you mentioned that prior to the pandemic, you weren't recording demos. Were you just coming in with the riffs and playing them for Max? And then you guys...
Yes, sort of. Like I would kind of like make a video of the song usually, and then I would send it to him. And that was as much as I did as far as demoing. And then we would get in the room, work out the song, record like a rehearsal recording, and then show the other guys. And then they just sort of go from there. I felt like we were working so fast, we just never stopped to be like, do we have to fix anything or change anything? It was just sort of, we were just kind of ripping through them. It was sort of wild. It was just like momentum on our side. I think we were just so jazzed and we weren't sure how long this was going to last, right? We kind of treated it like we were on borrowed time. And yeah, but
well, you guys were working pretty fast from album to album on those first three.
Yeah, tell me about it. It's like 3 in 3 years, right? Like it's crazy. And it's sort of like you finished an album and while you're waiting for it to get mixed and like come out, you just started writing the next one. And it was so funny. Like I still sort of have this problem with other stuff. Like, I mean, as an aside, my Doom band Dream Unending, by the time the first record came out, I was 2 months away from recording the second one. So it's the same with Tumult, where it's like you're seeing people and they're like, oh, I love this thing you just put out. And you're like, yeah, but wait till you hear the next thing, because we're already like maybe like halfway deep into it. Because we had a really good run of being able to practice every week. We weren't doing a ton of shows and touring at that point. You know what I mean? It wasn't until Planetary came out where we were playing like a lot of shows and doing a lot of stuff. And then that's when like the writing just stopped. You know what I mean? So we didn't have time. It was sort of, band practice was just rehearsal. It was like different. It was a little different.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
And as far as the demos that you're recording now, are you doing drum programming? Are you coming up with like the bass lines as well?
No, I don't. Yeah, I don't do any drum programming. I actually did. I have this program called Easy Drummer, and I used it to demo all of the songs on the new LP, but I never showed Max. I only showed like my bandmate Payson. It was sort of like just so you can kind of hear them in context of something.
Right.
Not saying this is how the drum should sound. Though it is funny. I think I did go back and listen to one, and I compared it to like how Max ended up playing the drums, because Max, he kind of dictates the drums himself. We never really give him any pointers. Maybe he'll try some stuff out and then we'll give him like a look if he's like really keyed in on something. But I think one of the songs, it was not super close, but it was pretty close. And maybe that's just me knowing Max's tendencies. And Max, it's just like, it's like speaking a different language with someone after a while when you like write enough songs with somebody. Like, what each person likes and where we can like push each other and whatnot. But yeah. So, but I did play bass on the new record, and I actually didn't think about bass much until maybe a month before we had to record the album. But I have the ability now, like I'm better at either demoing riffs or at least transcribing them into like a software program like Guitar Pro or something, where I can sit there and listen to something on loop and try out different ideas over it. Same with pacing, so we can show up to practice and be like, when you're playing that, I'm going to play this, or when I'm playing this, like you're going to play this sort of thing. That was definitely like a really big shift from the last records, was doing a lot more of that, like just like kind of like always trying to find ways to throw in little surprises in the songs and whatnot. Much more attention to detail, I guess.
So, The Enduring Spirit is the name of your latest album.
Yes.
And it was released on September 15th through 20 Buck Spin. We were speaking about how the writing, at least the process of writing the album, this album was different from previous albums. But going into it, do you have a feeling that you wanted to do something different musically?
I think so. I mean, what I liked about the 3 records we had up to that point was they were all death metal records, but they all had their own kind of flavor. Primordial is a super charming, kind of old school, super raw sounding album. Very cold sounding, super shrill. And that's because I only had really single coil guitars at the time, so we didn't get a big beefy sound out of anything. And then Manor was this sort of mid-paced, but still pretty raw, but big production kind of journey with this whole like subterranean horror theme. And then Planetary Clairvoyance is a more like compressed cosmic horror kind of album. It's way more claustrophobic sounding. It's super dark. And I think coming out of that, it was sort of like, I don't want to make a dark record like that again. I had started working on the first record for Dream Unending. So my guitars were in the tuning for that band, which is a little higher tuned than the last couple Tomb Mold records. So anytime I was sitting there kind of writing riffs, they were in this, just a step below standard tuning, a lot brighter sounding, and I would just maybe make a note of them and like, oh, maybe that can be a Tomb Mold riff. And then deciding that like I liked how that sounded, I liked the brightness of it. And I was listening to more, brighter technical thrash or death metal records. I was outside. It was like the spring and summer of 2020. I was running a lot. I was listening to lots of like fast records. And I think it was sort of, I wanted to do something like that. And I knew I wanted to write clean parts. And I knew I wanted it to be different. And I wanted to really challenge myself of like my ability to play guitar, because I was feeling so just engaged with the instrument. The pandemic, I think it did that for a lot of people. It just had so much time to play. And I just felt so, juiced creatively off writing that first Dream Unending record. And then I was coming up with all these ideas for Tomb Mold songs and working it out. And then I remember I had written 9 songs by that point, and I showed Payson and Max sort of being like, this is kind of where I'm at. This is a little different than what we normally do, but I think you're going to like it. And they both responded really well to it. And I remember like, Max loved like how melodic the songs got, and I think Payson did too. And he was like, these songs are much harder to play and it's going to be fun. And it was sort of just a way for us to kind of bring the best out of each other and just push ourselves as musicians. I think it was sort of, we also kind of realized we had no commitments. We had no time to play shows. We didn't have to do anything. So we were just sort of like, we can take our time and really just sharpen these songs. And then when we're ready, we'll go record it. And yeah.
So am I correct in saying that the songs for Aperture of Body and The Enduring Spirit were written in the same sessions?
They were, yes. So I think Aperture, like the title track, Aperture of Body off the tape, that was the first song I wrote. And then the song, the Prestige of Rebirth, that was, I believe, the 7th song I wrote. But when we started working out some of the songs, we quickly realized, well, I kind of said to them, I was like, we have 2 songs in this collection and they both can't be on the same album because they're both closing tracks.
Right.
And that was Prestige of Rebirth and The Enduring Spirit of Calamity. It was like, it doesn't make sense on the same album. And then I said, we have two songs that are the most OSDM of the batch. And that was Aperture of Body and what is it called? The second track off the album, Angelic Fabrications. So it was like those two both can't be on the LP. Only one can. And they really pushed for that song to stay on the LP. And I think it made sense. Aperture is if you're going to take two songs to put together, I think we picked the right two. You know what I mean? Like in my mind, they don't fit on the record, but they fit on that tape. I love that tape. So it kind of worked out perfect without realizing it. I thought maybe we were just going to make a 9-song LP, but then it would have been like 50 minutes and that would have been too long.
Yeah. You spoke about playing Max and your other bandmates the new material and their feedback being positive, but were you apprehensive at all about putting out these new songs into the world with the Aperture EP, and because it's been a while since people have heard Tomb Mold, so they may have been expecting Planetary Part 2 or something.
For sure. I mean, it's that funny thing where if a band changes their sound, you'll have like one camp being like, they changed their sound, right? And then if you don't change your sound, you have this one camp being like,
it sounds exactly like the last one.
They haven't changed. So I was like, well, I think I feel like the Aperture tape was a pretty good way of kind of being like, we're back, but it's a little different. The riffs are a little bit more involved. We have more solos. There's fretless bass. There's clean parts. So we kind of laid out the blueprint of what was to come, but what we weren't showing was just how melodic the songs had gotten. And I think the songs on the LP sound much crazier than the songs on the tape, which have crazy moments, don't get me wrong, but the album has, at times, it's way more unhinged sounding. But no, I was more apprehensive of showing them. I think once they kind of gave it the seal of approval, I sort of knew. It was like, okay, like we're good. Like this is going to be great. And, a couple of the songs, they got reworked a bit during the writing process, or rather, maybe I kind of thought, this is a bad ending. I want to rewrite the ending. And then the ending you're rewriting is adding anywhere from 90 seconds to 3 minutes to a given song. But was I apprehensive about putting it out and how people would respond to it? No, not really. Because at the end of the day, like I write music for me and my bandmates, right? It's for us. It's, I think what we've realized at this point is just that making music together is great. And even if we had lost everybody with this one, I think we would have just kept making music, because I think the process of writing together is such a rewarding experience. But it seems like people enjoy the sound, so that's great. But no, I didn't think too much about it. I just had I guess I just had belief in it. But I tend to feel that way about everything I do. Not like blind faith or anything, but just, I'm true to myself in my songwriting. I write for me at the end of the day. And so I can always appreciate it and like it. Even when I listen to stuff that is from years back and maybe I'm like, well, I wouldn't write anything like that now, but it's cool that that got me to where I am now. So each piece matters, and like documenting this growth is, for all of us, is really cool.
I mean, it's a very ambitious album from the songwriting perspective and even the recording perspective. We spoke about, whether or not you consider Tomb Mold to be a progressive band, but it does sound like, there's a conscious attempt to evolve your sound with every album, and this one is maybe, the furthest you've pushed your sound so far. For sure. But it's funny because I've said this before, this isn't anything new, but to me, like, this record kind of feels like the first Tomb Mold record in ways, only because of how collaborative it was and how I feel like everybody has a lot of shine on this record, because, I kind of came to Pace and the other guitar player and was like, I want to write a lot of leads for this record. And he was like, okay. I was like, but that means like you have to write a lot of leads too. And it's just the thing, there are lots of songs where we just didn't have leads. We might have like little licks here and there, but we just never had like full blown solos. But I was like, no, I want to do it. Like, I want it to be fun. And, a lot more of Payson being like, when you play that, I should play this. And I'm just like, yeah, okay. Or the other way around. And there's just more happening. And then the bass underneath it is sort of funny to me, because it sounds like
it's funny to hear, you know, my voice through the guitar, Payson's voice through his guitar, Max's voice through his drums and vocals, but then like there's just like me trying to talk over everybody with my bass playing. But luckily it sits well in the mix, so that's good. But it was it was a lot of different aspects compared to the other ones. Payson will say the old records almost sound like a 16 string guitar, because it's just these kind of three things being played in unison.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But now it's much more like textural and like much more layered, I guess, with that stuff. But I think also we just all saw so much growth in each other as musicians that it was like, this was the only way we could do it.